Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me is Mike.
Hey,
Uh,
everybody.
Mike, fun conversation for us today. Seen this in a lot of comments, seen this in a bunch of different sites as well, and different YouTube channels and things like that. And so thought we'd just kind of toss our 2 cents in on it. The concept of negativity from comic book fans, from who you name it, negativity around comic books. Do we think it's actually hurting the industry to the point to where it's deterring new fans? And do we think the negativity is kind of out of whack? And so I think we can kind of just talk about this a little bit. And look, I think what we want to make sure you preface it. If you express your opinion on something and you truly think it's bad, you should always do that. Right? That's completely different. I think what mainly we're talking about is people who over exaggerate or people who are looking through a certain lens. Maybe they see a story and they don't even check the details, but they do a 20-minute video about why something's awful and stupid, and then it turns out it wasn't even an accurate thing. So I think
Hmm.
we're more talking just that spirit of negativity from so much coverage. So I'll just ask you, Mike, as a comic book fan, does negativity around the industry from people, does it affect your reading habits? Does it affect how you view the books? Like how does that hit you as a reader?
I would like to shout out a couple of really good YouTube channels like Comics Explained and a couple of others. When I got into comic book internet media,
Mhm.
I had some really good, forays into this sphere, 10 years ago, and enjoyed them immensely. But as a comic book fan and tiptoeing my way into this new extension of the media, the criticism of the media,
Mhm.
um, I started to notice more and more in my feed of a lot of negativity. And of course, spoilers. And, I found that I had my own take on stuff. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners, if they're honest with themselves, they also have their own take on the stuff. And um, I know for a fact, and so what happened with me is I just quit watching a lot of online content because I wanted, I was going to be at the comic shop anyway. And once in a while you buy a comic and it's not what you expect. But
Yeah.
you know, uh, but I know for a fact that my son, who is 17, and his generation, that's almost all they consume is what's online, and very rarely get to go buy comics, except for when you know pick up his friends and take them to the comic shop. That's the only time they go. And they're very particular. And I know it has a big impact on him, especially Jackson, because we've had these talks where he's like, "Yeah, no, Dad, that story's bad. I've heard a lot of bad things about it." And so, yeah, we're in this catch-22 right now, where if you're in the ecosphere of online content, in order to get your numbers up, you have to go negative because the algorithm is built for the negativity, and it'll push negativity and you'll get more clicks. But are you really doing comic books a service? How bad was this comic for you to go extreme on it? And I've seen some extreme ones, and I'm like, really? Was it that bad? It was just a $3.99 comic book. It's not the end of your life. And so, yeah, the medium is driven for negativity, and then the newer generation coming in, that's all they consume. So why would you buy the comic when somebody else bought it for you and can tell you it's terrible? Why would you buy it? I think it's a bad negative spiral.
So it's really interesting to me in that I think we have a huge problem on both ends of the spectrum. I think it's either 100% positive and deliberately ignore stuff, or 100% negative. And I think we have very few far in between. who will kind of just call it as it is, or be willing to admit, hey, I was really negative on this, but it ended up being really good.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
like the sports analogy, like the umpire, right?
yeah,
The umpire will make some bad calls in baseball, and everyone will hate him. But the rest of the game was, he'll call fair, or you'll have a really unfair umpire, or an overly generous one.
yeah, I think the weirdest thing is I think everything exists in extremes now. I think especially around nerd culture more than anything. And I think what happened is the, you and I, you're older than I am, but even me being kid who grew up in the 90s, nerd stuff wasn't cool. It wasn't out there. There was a ton of people who made fun of you for liking this kind of stuff, whether it was Star Trek, Star Wars, comic books, didn't matter, Batman, Superman, whatever, Spider-Man, didn't matter. The MCU and that blowing up, Star Wars has always been kind of mainstream, but even that blew up. What that did is I think it divided people into two things. It divided folks into shills, and then it divided people into haters. And so I think what you have a lot of is I think you have a lot of what people call like access media. And I can't stand folks like that where it's like, let me tell you how amazing this comic book is. And then the next thing is an interview with the creator of the comic book. And then they're talking about, oh, well, I met him. And so it's like, okay, so do I really trust your opinion? Or is it you got access to the information, you feel important, and therefore that skews your opinion, right? Again, I'm not blaming anybody for interviewing somebody, but I do think it's very interesting how like, oh look, I was at the Star Wars HQ with all the Disney people, and my review on the new Star Wars show is it's the greatest thing ever. I was like, yeah,
Right.
okay, sure. At the same time, you'll get folks where, hey, they'll do a video about, hey, so and so creator blocked me on Twitter, and then now the next six videos are about how crappy that comic book is, and their comics are terrible, and this guy can't write, and it's like maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle on that. I think the biggest thing with comic books that happened is because it went mainstream, there's a lot of people who got involved with comic books who don't care about comic books. And so I don't think it's negativity or positivity that destroys the comic book industry. I think it's people who are opportunists who look at this and they don't really care. When I see people praising certain stories at times, not to say not true fans or things like that, you can tell me it's well written. But when they do things that are so out of character or so not in alignment with anything in the continuity of a character, and then people just want to heap praise on it like it's amazing, it's like, nah, that's not right. And I think the same thing happens when you get people where when you can't stand something and you repeatedly just trash it, there's a personal thing that happens. And that's I think the hard part comic books is dealing with is this has become so niche, but the coverage of it has actually blown up in a way that's larger than even when it was selling a million copies back in the day. And so now a bad comic book that maybe 10,000 people read probably gets millions of views online combined if you combine all the channels. And it just puts out that, oh, hey, look how stupid DC is or look how stupid Marvel is. And so I think we're just in a really weird era of time where I don't blame anybody for sharing your opinion. Look, me and you were on here sharing our opinions. I got no problem with that. I'm a free speech absolutist in terms of I think people should be able to say what they want to. But I do think if you ask, do I think negativity is hurting comic books? Yeah, of course it is. But it's the same thing that I think is hurting stuff like the MCU, and I think it's the same thing that's hurting stuff like Star Wars and Star Trek. And you can blame who you want to on that. I think a lot the comic book companies have earned the scorn that they get from some people too. And so has Disney and so has Star Wars and Star Trek. It's just we're in a really weird area of nerd culture where what I miss when debates were about what was in the pages. I miss when the conversation online was like, man, what did you think of that newest issue of Spider-Man? What do you think? Where do you think the story's going? What do you think they're doing? Who do you think the bad guy is? All that stuff. You rarely see that stuff anymore. Instead, it's this artist sucks and how bad is this run? And that's the majority of the coverage. And I think that's just sad. I think that's happened to so much nerd culture stuff that
The
it's hard to see.
the value is the value is lost when you can't decide for yourself.
Mhm.
Um, and I still, to this day, when a movie's coming out, I will stay away from coverage. just because I know I'm going to see it. I'll hear some anecdotally from Jackson. Oh, Dad, watch out! They say it's going to be bad, and I'll be like, let's just wait and let's see for ourselves. Um, because when you're a true fan of this stuff, you're probably going to go see it anyway. And when it's a comic book that you've been waiting for, like Absolute Flash, I was waiting for that since Absolute started. Um, I'm sure there was probably a lot of coverage about, oh, the costume's terrible and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But I stayed away from it because I knew I was going to buy the book, and I'll be the decider myself. And I feel like you know as a whole, we've lost that ability to decipher and discern for ourselves, which is critical. Just in human experience in general, is really critical. Like if you can't decide for yourself that you like it, or be able to read the material and be objective enough to go, you know what? Yeah, that one little thing that they were harping about online that was out of continuity and they blew it up and said it ruined the story. Being able to understand yourself, well, you know, that was a small detail in the book and everything else I liked, and and not just go down a tunnel of negativity and trash the whole comic when it was only one little thing. They do that with movies and stuff all the time, and they're like, oh, I, there was some movie Jackson was telling me about. This guy did like a 4-hour breakdown of how everything was bad, and it was a movie that he and I enjoyed. I forget which movie it is now, and I'm like, and he's like, Dad, I have to say I hate that movie now. And I'm like, but we have fun watching it. What and it's just weird that it's like that because of that we can't we've lost the ability to discern for ourselves. I don't know why that is. It's just really
Well,
weird.
I,
But you can grab that back. I'm just telling you, you can
well, I
grab
think
back your power.
what has happened is there is now a market of people who themselves do this whole, and again, I don't blame them if you're making money off of it. Like, I'm not going to judge you on it. But there's people who now do the whole, I'll watch the movie and comment on it so you don't have to kind of attitude of things. And
How
look,
is that going to help things?
you can make a career doing that. But I do think it's funny. The most divisive thing in nerd culture to me is Star Wars. And what's so interesting is if I look at since Disney bought Star Wars, I have seen it break into people either with 1,000 suns fiery passion hate it or defend it. Like it's I rarely see people who are in the middle on it. And as weird as like I feel completely lost on it. And that like what the first one was it Force Awakens? I liked that movie. The Last Jedi, I think, is one of the worst movies ever made. Right. And then the third one is kind of eh. And like most of the TV shows, The Mandalorian, it's okay. But it's not like I never got like, oh my God, this is amazing. And it seems like the reaction is always there's either a person who says, it's amazing, it's incredible, it's the greatest thing ever, or
Well,
this is absolute garbage and it sucks. And what's the new one, Andor, that came out? And Andor is the weirdest show. And like, I've tried watching it. It's not bad, but it's not great. And yet the reactions to it online are either greatest Star Wars ever, I can't believe we have a show like this, or trash, garbage, awful. And it's just that's the hardest part of the analysis of things. And I think the issue we've had is because the coverage around it for comic. I'm not something like Star Wars was interesting. It's because millions of people, even the worst Star Wars project, probably gets 4 or 5 million people watching it. It
yeah.
doesn't really affect it. Comics is different, and that most books are selling 30,000 copies. Like your huge ones are maybe selling 150,000 copies. I don't know if there's any book currently selling that much, but let's say 150,000 copies. And yet the engagement online is millions upon millions of people when you break down all the channels. And so it's interesting is there's more people watching the coverage of the books than there is actually reading the comic book.
That
And I
is
think
so strange, coming
that
from
is
the
where
old
the
school.
comic book
Yeah.
cultures are in trouble in that when the coverage of supersedes the actual readership, whoever has the loudest voice is going to make the determination on how stuff gets received. And I think it's interesting because like you, I've had times where I've read a comic book I'm trying to remember the one I read a few weeks back. And I read it and I thought, look, I didn't think it was great. I didn't think it was awful. I thought it was harmless. It was just the most meh comic book I've read.
Yeah,
And then I saw the coverage on it. I think it was One World Under Doom, the event they're doing. And I read it and I'm like, it's fine. Like we've seen this a million times. The bad guy takes over kind of thing. I didn't see anything in it that was noteworthy. And the reaction to it was, this is this political statement, and people are like all mad about it or all defending it. It's like, honestly, I read the thing twice and I'm like, I don't see where any of that's from. But what it showed me is there is a lot of people now, when you read stuff, you are looking for a certain angle. And if you have a built-in audience of people who expect, when I watch something like this, I'm going to attack it from this angle,
yeah.
then that's what you're going to look for.
And
Um,
my audience is going to jump on my side, and we're all going to hate on it
well,
together. It doesn't serve the industry very well.
but what I will say, where I don't blame people who are critical, the industry deserves all the criticism it gets, in my opinion, because we've gotten lazy. And this is the one reason I will never get too mad about people being negative with comic books. The creatives now are lazy. Not all of them, but the majority. And when I say the creatives, I think I'm talking more the editors and the people who run the overall companies. I don't think the actual writers and artists, some probably, are really lazy. I think it's more the editorial people who just want these characters on a treadmill more and more and more, and they don't want to do the character progression. They don't want to do the stories from years ago. They get swept up in like, oh, let's try this. And even though there's no backstory for it, there's no foundation for it. They just decide, hey, one line in one book is going to fundamentally change how this character is, and we're going to go with it like that's the defining trait. And so where I can't get defensive of the comic book industry or really defend them and be like, how dare people be negative? Is they earn it. How many continuity and like here's the big issue I would have. Even like the MCU even. The MCU makes continuity errors all the time. Like huge continuity errors. And it's like, this is your job. Like your whole job is to make sure that this thing fits in canon. And you didn't do it. So like I can't get mad when you mess up, especially comic books. Comic books, look, I get it. Continuity's convoluted, things are messy, stuff doesn't make sense. But if you're writing a comic book, I don't think it's unfair to expect that you would have done more research than the average fan has, right? If you're the guy entrusted to write the Flash or Spider-Man or Batman, it's your dang job to go do the research and see what happened before. And if your story doesn't align with what's happened before, you can't get mad when people get upset that you didn't follow things.
Well, I would counter that and say that continuity's gotten so messy that you can't help but do that once in a while. And I've seen some of them break it to try and fix it. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't.
I think that like because everyone, I think one thing I would say does make me mad is when people go, well, continuity's screwy. And I get that. That is, you're 100% right. Like, it's screwy. What doesn't make me mad is why was there no one along the way at Marvel and DC to go,
It's
guys, wait, that doesn't fit. That doesn't fit. Wait, this doesn't fit. And again, like you said, I just wish we had somebody who would go and, you know what, guys, we're fixing this. Right. What ticks me off with Marvel and DC is someone somewhere should have the job to look at things and go, hey guys, this is broken. This doesn't work. We don't need to figure out another 20 stories. We have to fix this so that the people who are reading this know what the heck is going on. And I think a great example was the New 52. We just recently did a video on the channel about that. The New
Yep.
52 had some interesting ideas, but where it ultimately was such a disappointment at times. I don't know what the heck was in continuity and what wasn't. Because apparently this was a refresh, right? So I remember in the New 52 Superman, I'll just bring him as an example. Okay, so in the New 52, Superman's no longer married to Lois Lane. But when he fights Doomsday the first time, he had already fought Doomsday before. And so it's like, wait, did the Doomsday thing where Superman died, where he was married to Lois Lane, did that happen? Or did it not? Or was it different? And no one could explain it. It's just kind of loosely Superman died fighting Doomsday. And I think it's the same thing we're seeing James Gunn do at the DCU right now, where some stuff's in continuity, some isn't. Right? I want to keep the Suicide Squad movie, but even though that had elements that were in the old universe, I don't want all of that. I just want you to pay attention to the parts and it's like that. It doesn't work that way. you have to be able to pick and clearly do a path. And so where I have a very hard time when people criticize stuff and say that negativity is hurting comic books, where I say somewhat, but I can't 100% agree, they earn it. They earn the negativity. It's the same as like a sport. Well, gotta work a sports analogy in the NBA. The NBA gets a lot of crap right now, the National Basketball Association. And I used to love the NBA. Where I never care when people are negative on the NBA anymore, the players themselves earn the scorn because the players just decide now in a way that no other generation of players ever. There's just nights they decide they're not going to play. Like they do this thing called load management now, where superstar players, they're not hurt. They just decide Tuesday night, I don't feel like playing today. Even though I have a 6 month off season, even though I'm paid $52 million a year to play basketball, I've just decided I'm not playing. Like I remember taking my wife on a date to a Spurs game here locally. The three best players in the Spurs and the two best players in the Bulls, because we bought tickets to Spurs Bulls because she's a Spurs fan, I'm a Bulls fan. The five best players in the game all didn't play. None of them were hurt. They all just decided that night, Wednesday night, not worth it. And it's like, so do we get to like get a refund the tickets because we didn't. And
You got to see him on the bench.
that's the whole thing is when comic books, when you want to charge more, when you want to undo continuity, when you want to ignore what the guys who created the industry did, you earn the negativity. And so while I don't like it, and I do don't, and I will say I don't like the people who are opportunistic as far as the folks who they don't actually read the book to read the book. They read it to where can I pick and choose and get mad and show people this sucks and just those people I'm not huge fans of. But it is really dang hard to defend the comic book industry in terms of they have earned a lot of the scorn they've gotten. And
Yeah, I agree.
it's hard to defend them.
I think a couple of things. In the old days, there were these overarching editors that really steered the ship for everyone, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there's a whole lot of that going on. Not like it used to. But then the bottom line for me is, buy the book, read it yourself, see if you can put away or put aside some of the feedback that you've heard about it already, and just make an honest judgment for yourself. There's a hardcore group of fans that are tried and true for some of these new storylines that I stopped reading a long time ago, but
Mm-hmm.
they like it and they enjoy it. But you know, anyway, I just feel like we as real fans need to kind of take that angle back and make sure if someone's going to trash it online that you understand why and that you really do agree with them, or be open at least to maybe disagreeing.
Yeah. No, I think there's. I don't think there's anything wrong in saying that. I just. The biggest point that you raise that I think we need, and I don't care whose responsibility it is, but that Marvel and DC need to do. We need some of the old editors that we used to have. I don't care who you got to appoint. You need somebody, and that's the thing is they feel like a ship that's just going with the wind. And the thing is, there needs to be somebody who's like, hey guys, no, 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 that doesn't work. That doesn't line up with it. You're not doing that. And not tell them, oh, well, you know what? I like this creative. I'm going to let them do what they want. Like, no, there needs to be people. And that's the thing I think that is missing from comic books that opens them up to so much scorn is there needs to be somebody in the position at Marvel and at DC who look, if you're there just needs to be someone who can read all the comic books each month and go
The
like, guys,
passion,
no, you're not
passion,
doing that.
the
You're
passion.
not. And that's I have such a hard time believing that nobody at Marvel, when the X-Men had, hey, Nightcrawler is going to murder 12 people this issue, there should have been someone at Marvel being like, guys, if you read the entire history of this character,
Yeah,
none of this works. No. Or even if you want the story to happen, hey guys, you need to explain how we got from point A to point B a lot better. Something needs to happen to show how we got here. Instead, we don't have anybody doing that. And so when you don't have anyone doing that, or at least not doing it well, then yeah, you're going to get the negativity. You're going to get the scorn. And like you said, I do think it's over exaggerated. I do wish more people would, read it or maybe not come up with preconceived notions. But when these companies do it, the things the way they've done them, and they kind of just act like, hey man, just go with it, or if you're not a real fan, yeah, you're gonna invite a lot of negativity. As you said though, let us know. What do you guys think below, guys? What is your opinion on this? Do you think coverage is too negative? Do you think it's too positive? Do you guys see it completely differently? And again, if you disagree with or agree with us on any video that we do, folks, you can tell us you think we're stupid. That's okay. We're completely fine with it. We welcome the feedback. If you agree with us, that's awesome. We're never going to take any of that stuff personally. We appreciate any feedback we get from you guys. Thank you, as always, for watching. God bless you. We'll catch you in our next video.
Thanks, everybody.